It's the one, it's to... No, it's not. Oh, but using community. I don't know why I typed it correctly.
Good evening, everybody. Please be seated. Can I welcome everyone to this full council meeting? And before the meeting starts, I just want to make an announcement about filming at meetings. So please note, there is no scheduled fire alert, and if you do hear a fire alarm, please follow the advice of the security officers here this evening. Please note, this meeting may be filmed or recorded by the council for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site, or by anyone attending the meeting using any communication method. Although we ask members of the public recording, filming or reporting on the meeting not to include the public seating areas, members of the public attending the meeting should be aware that we cannot guarantee that you will not be filmed or recorded by others attending the meeting. Members of the public participating in the meeting, for example making deputations, asking questions or making oral protests, should be aware that they are likely to be filmed, recorded or reported on. By entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings. As the chair of the meeting, I have the discretion to terminate or suspend filming or recording if, in my opinion, continuation of the filming, recording or reporting would disrupt or prejudice the proceedings, infringe the rights of any individual, or may lead to the breach of a legal obligation by the council. And before the meeting starts, can I make a request that if any member is going to speak, that they could speak clearly and loudly into the microphone, as sometimes in the acoustics in this room, some members can't be heard. So if I could make that request, please. And I now move on to item 2 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
Mr Mayor, apologies for absence have been received from councillors Adamu, Armet, Brabazon, Gideon Bull, Carroll, Ejiofor, Elliott, Gallagher, Gunes, Hearn, Ibrahim, Jogi, McNamara, Rice and Stennett, and apologies for lateness have been received from councillors Ajay, Bevan, Berryman, Mark Blake and Councillor Opoku.
Thank you very much. Late items of urgent business.
Mr Mayor, there are 2 late items of business which could not be available earlier and which will need to be dealt with at this meeting. Item 12C, report from the Corporate Committee. The Corporate Committee met on Thursday the 30th of November, and could only refer their report following its consideration at that meeting. Item 17, questions and written answers. The reason for lateness is that notice of questions is not requested until 8 clear days before the meeting, following which the matters raised have to be researched and replies prepared to be given at the meeting.
Thank you very much. Item 4, declarations of interest. Under the Council's agreed Code of Conduct, members are required to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or prejudicial interest as defined by the Code at any meeting, may not participate in any discussion or vote on the matter and must withdraw from the meeting room. Details of the requirement to make declaration of interest are shown on your printed summons on item 4. Should you need to make any such declarations, you should do so now by clearly stating the reasons and the nature of the interest. Members with a sensitive interest as defined in the Code must declare that they have a disclosable interest, but the details of the interest need not be disclosed. Would anyone like to declare an interest? Yes,
Chair, I have an interest in the deputation. I'm a member of Unison as a member in local government, and I also work for a local government as well.
Thank you very much. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, I'm going to declare a matter of declaration of interest myself on item 18 motions, the motion on the post office closures. I declare my interest as a member of the Communication Workers Union. Thank you. Item 5, minutes of council meeting 24th of July 2017. May I call upon the interim chief executive.
Mr Mayor, I would ask the Council to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of July 2017.
Are they agreed? Thank you very much. They are agreed. Item 6, to receive such communication as the Mayor may lay before the Council meeting. Members received in the summons to this meeting an outline of some of the 100+ events and functions I have attended as Mayor, and I am, as ever, grateful to the Deputy Mayor and my predecessors for their support in ensuring Haringey is represented at even more events. I wanted to quickly mention some particularly special things. Last Friday night we had a fantastic winter gala in aid of the Mayor's Special Fund, and I'm grateful to all of those who were able to attend and support my fundraising for mental health and wellbeing in Haringey. Last month I had the honour of representing the borough at our Remembrance Sunday events, and I was very proud of both the incredible turnout and how well the Wood Green Memorial looked after the excellent tidy-up exercise by members of the Armed Forces and a Spurs player, Christian Eriksen, the week before. I was pleased to give awards to Homes for Haringey residents, and in particular a lifetime award to Yvonne Denny at a Homes for Haringey rewarding resident volunteers evening last month. I think that we all know Yvonne, and we are grateful for her contribution to Haringey's life. I've also visited a number of primary schools where I've been discussing my What Makes You Happy art competition, and I will be announcing the winners of this competition in January. Last week I attended Haringey Young Musicians Winter Concert and presented the Music Teacher of the Year Award to Catty Alberman, and I think we can all be very proud of the Haringey Young Musicians, and I'm pleased to support them as Mayor. Finally, I know the Chamber will share my sadness at the passing of former councillor Nilgan Canva. There are many councillors who attended her funeral and spoke there as well, and I know what a contribution she made to the council and to the people of Haringey. And I'd like you to now stand and join with me in a moment's silence in memory of Nilgan. Thank you very much. Item 7, appointment of the Chief Executive. I call on the Chair of the Staffing and Remunerations Committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that full council approve the appointment of Zena Etheridge as Chief Executive in line with the recommendations of the report of the Staffing and Remuneration Committee.
Thank you very much. Is it agreed? Okay, it's agreed. Item number 8, to receive the report of the Chief Executive.
after that dramatic silence, I have no matters to report, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Thank you very much. And now I move on to item 9, report of the monitoring officer, and I call on the monitoring officer. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 10, appointments to outside bodies. I call on the Assistant Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that we adopt the appointments set out on page 17.
Thank you very much. Are they agreed? They are agreed. Item 11, to consider requests to receive deputations and/or petitions, if approved, to receive them. I have accepted one deputation to this evening's meeting, and I call upon Sean Fox, who is joined by Gerard McGrath, Andrea Holden, Chris Taylor and Maggie Griffin. And you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and may we offer our condolences to Councillor Canva's family as well. She was a well-known councillor to many of us who work in Haringey, so I'd like to add those to the memories that were mentioned earlier. My name is Sean Fox. I'm the Joint Branch Secretary and Trade Union Joint Secretary in Haringey Unison. We asked to do this deputation because the issue of local government pay is becoming a crisis one. In the last 7 years, pay for local government workers has fallen in real terms by 22%. Now, I ask anyone in this room to imagine 22% less purchasing power when their house prices are going up, their food prices are going up, their bills are going up and their petrol is going up, not to mention all the other services that people have to pay for. Inflation currently, even by the lower measure, is running at 3%. The higher measure, which includes housing, which is a very pertinent issue in a borough like Haringey at the moment, I'm sure we'd all agree on that, where housing is something that's accelerating in cost, then we see a real crisis. Our members and your residents, full-time workers, are being forced to go to food banks. In 2017, people going to food banks who work full-time for a local authority. None of us should find that acceptable, and none of us should be prepared to put up with that. The pay cap has failed to save jobs. When it was introduced in 2010, we were told, if you accept pay restraint, jobs will be saved. Well, I'm afraid I've stood at this rostrum over the last 7 years, and I don't remember it saving very many jobs. I remember watching jobs get privatised, cut, outsourced, and not a single job was saved. So, councillors, our claim is very simple. Our claim is for 5% and deletion of the bottom 3 spinal points. Haringey introduced the London Living Wage as something I was very proud of when we did it. But one of the reasons I was very proud of it was at the time it affected very few local government workers because we had proper pay. The last increase in the London Living Wage, which was announced in November of this year, now raises to spinal point 16. That's scale 3. Our spinal points start at scale 6. So in effect, there are 10 spinal points now below the London Living Wage in this authority. And not just in this authority, but across London and across the country. The situation is becoming untenable. We are calling on local authorities to use their lobbying power with the national employers to actually make a pay offer which will deal with pay poverty. Let's make pay poverty history, councillors. Let's say, as a council which believes in social justice, that we can no longer tolerate our members and your residents going to food banks. We can no longer tolerate people losing their homes and getting into rent arrears. And let's not forget, many of those members and residents are the electorate as well. They're not only solely people who work for Haringey Council, there will be many people who will be your constituents who work for other local authorities, for schools, for outsourced companies, who are also affected by the pay restraint, the 1%. We are saying to local authorities it's time to break the pay freeze. National leaders of both parties represented in this chamber agree with us. Mr Corbyn and Mr Cable agree with us that pay restraint is unsustainable, untenable and, most importantly, unfair on the lowest paid people in local authorities. It's time to break that freeze. It's time to say to people now, we work in a local authority, we want you to be able to live with dignity and pride. We want you to be able to participate in your local communities without worrying about being able to pay your bills or whether you turn the heating on or eat. That's the reality of what most people in local government are facing, and it's getting worse year on year on year. So think about this. The pay awards we've got over the last 7 years equal 3%. Inflation over the same period equals 22%, roughly, and inflation, unfortunately, as the Bank of England have said, is continuing to increase and is likely to do so as we enter Brexit and we enter devaluation of the pound. Those are the realities that your workers, your constituents are facing. We say to Haringey tonight, you can make a stand on this. You can't do it alone, but you can use your influence, and there are people in this room who have significant influence amongst the employers' organisation, I'm aware of that, because they hold positions within it. They can use that influence for the good of their employees and for the good of the residents of Haringey. And they can say now that they can afford a decent pay rise, they can afford to actually break the 1%, and they can afford to restore real earnings for people, so that the workers who deliver the services that we all hold so dear actually don't have to access some of them themselves as users. That's the reality of working for Haringey and other local authorities at the moment. As housing costs go up, bills go up, and wages do not. We say to the Council today that you can change this, you can make a difference, you can make a decision, you can say to your national representatives that the pay freeze is unsustainable, unfair and unreasonable, and you can say to them today, in advance of them making an offer on December the 13th, that we need to stop the rot. We can't have a situation where increasingly people in this local authority depend on a pay rise for an announcement made for what used to be the minimum wage, the London living wage. That's just not sustainable. Thank you for your time, councillors, and I urge you to actually take this issue up.
Thank you very much, Sean. Do any members have any questions to... Yes, Councillor Kerber.
Just to say thank you for your deputation, and you are right that some of us are involved in those conversations. And what I would say to you is that I'm hopeful that in the next week that there will be positive news. Certainly I can speak on behalf of Labour in local government, and I think we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks. My question, however, given that I've got to ask a question, is that you'll recall that the trade unions and Labour in local government have united in saying that a pay increase has got to happen, but that government must foot the bill for that. And if we reach a situation in the next week where a pay increase is possible but government doesn't foot the bill, will you join with us in continuing to press government to adequately fund public services, local government? Because you know that we're stuck in a very difficult situation where actually the staff who provide our services, who do a really important job, they don't get a wage increase because of some of the cuts that we face. So will you stand with us on this?
Thank you, Councillor Cover, for your question. Thank you, Councillor Cover, for your question. I think you'll be well aware that the trade unions have indeed already approached the Secretary of State for local government and the Chancellor of the Exchequer and, in fact, the current Prime Minister to ask for sufficient funding to actually make the claim a reality. We know what the effect of local government is. We live it. We see it every day. We know what the cuts are doing. That's part of the problem, is that the cuts are causing even more stress and even more distress for the people who are already getting pay caps.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Okay. I now call upon the Cabinet Member of Finance and Health to respond to the deputation. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Sean, thank you for your deputation, and the picture you've actually painted is something that I see on a daily basis as a council employee. Just to say that we are sympathetic to the trade union position, and it is outrageous that the government has held down public sector pay for as long as it has, and that has, as you said, become untenable and unacceptable, and we do agree with that. However, Haringey Council has a local collective agreement with the Traders Union to automatically adopt the outcomes of the NJC negotiations on terms and conditions, including pay. Therefore, we cannot respond unilaterally to the trade union's request to fund the pay claim in full. However, we are working with our colleagues across local government. A technical working group has been formed to devise a pay spine that is legal, legally compliant with the national living wage and does not cause equal pay problems. We will continue to work with our colleagues across local government to lobby, to press central government for a fair pay for our fair day's work. And we will continue to work with our colleagues in the trade unions to find a satisfactory way forward and a conclusion to their pay freeze. So thank you for your deputation. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much for that. And can I say that that now concludes the item? And can I thank the deputation and ask members to join me in a round of applause? Thank you. Item 12, to receive reports from the following bodies. We have 3 reports before us this evening. And first, can I call upon the Chair of the Standards Committee? Before you do, can I just say this isn't a public meeting. This is a meeting in public, and will the gallery please allow the meeting to be conducted in the way that we need to get through the business? I would ask you to refrain from comments and singing and making a noise. Thank you very much. Councillor Amin. Is the recommendation agreed? Thank you very much. I now call on the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Annual report is in the bundle. I recommend that full council notes the annual report. I will just thank those members of the committee who've taken part on scrutiny over the over the period, and will continue to do so. Budget scrutiny coming up, and highlight also the work that we've been doing on the joint health scrutiny committee with my colleague Councillor Connor, which has been an important aspect of our work, highlighting the serious issues actually in the health service across north central London, and I think we've played an important role there in highlighting both the risks and the needs for accountability on that. So I'd just highlight that and ask that the full council notes the report.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Is the recommendation agreed? It's agreed. I now call upon the Chair of the Corporate Committee.
Mr. Mayor, I move this report from the Corporate Committee and its recommendations.
Is the recommendation agreed? Item 13, Council Tax Reduction Scheme. I call upon the Cabinet Member for Finance and Health.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just quickly to say, building on what's in the report and building on the discussions that Overview and Scrutiny have had on council tax collection, that members will be aware that obviously with the 10% cut in council tax benefit and the actual abolition of the scheme, we've had to bring in council tax reduction scheme. But it is important that we recognise that there are a number of individuals and families who used to not have to pay council tax who are now paying it, and that obviously has created some hardship for those individuals and families, and it's absolutely right that we as a council take that into account and do everything that we can to support them. So building on the conversations that Scrutiny have had, we'll be continuing to look at our collection practices. We'll be involved in a pilot with the Money Advice Trust in order to make sure that we're reviewing that and thinking about new approaches to collection. And I'll also be with Councillor Zmerci setting up a working group again to look at our practices to make sure that they are exactly where they should be, where we're taking a fair stance but also making sure that we're being as supportive to vulnerable individuals and families as possible.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members? Okay, are the recommendations agreed? Thank you very much. Item 14, I call on the Cabinet Member for Housing, Regeneration and Planning. Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I see pantomime season's in full swing. I'd like to move the report and the recommendations it contains. This is a report on Harrogate West. Members will be aware this has gone to Cabinet repeatedly over a period of years, and also importantly, as the report highlights, 70% of the tenants who took part in the consultation on this supported the regeneration scheme. So fantastic that tenants have supported this. We were clear we would only go ahead with their support. All tenants are guaranteed a right to return, as well as lots of replacement homes, replacement council homes. There's additional affordable housing, new facilities, new job space, and a new public square, as well as a new council library, which is fantastic. So this is really just the end of the process, and full council has to refer the decision to the Secretary of State for final approval.
Are there any questions from members? Councillor.
Thank you. Let me start, Mr. Mayor, by saying that this government has devastated local government, and it has created an unprecedented housing crisis. Therefore, local authorities have got no choice but, in desperation, to try to find any solutions they can help them do something about it. And sometimes some of those solutions that come up are straightforward, and sometimes they are not as straightforward. I think there have been some adjustments to this particular programme following consultation and scrutiny reports, some welcome improvements, and so on, but a number of my constituents have raised a number of additional concerns or ongoing concerns about it. I think most of the colleagues here have heard the same things again and again, and raised concerns raising from whether the adequacy of the quality impact assessment, for example, or to the desire that probably we should have more social housing and so on. And I think that these concerns at least have to be put on record, and at least they have been to be acknowledged and addressed, because the last thing I would want, and I'm sure every councillor here wants, is our constituents to have the impression that we are ignoring them. I note that there are some issues still to be ironed out before we make the Council makes the submission to the Secretary of State, and after that, after the submission, usually takes a few weeks before the decision is communicated to the Council. That gives us an opening, I think, that enabling us to continue actually addressing as many of those concerns as we can before we finally, as a Council, sign to something that probably will be costly to change later. And I'm sure I expect that is what our Cabinet will be doing in any case, and I'm sure that my constituents, they will be probably sort of happy that I am making, or they will welcome my statement, but I'm sure also they will be even more satisfied if the leader or the Cabinet member, in their summing up, would reassert that thing, that we will continue keeping up, looking at the concerns expressed and try to find solutions to them before we sign anything up. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I ask Councillor Strickland a question? It's a pretty simple one about the Haringey housing strategy. I've got two documents here. One has been superseded, and in that there is a single mention of the phrase council housing. It's on page 12, but that document's actually been superseded by this one, which is 44 pages. Can I ask, please, why is it in the current housing strategy there is not a single mention of the phrase council housing? Thank you.
Councillor Strickland.
Thank you very much for your questions. So, Councillor Diakides, obviously Harrod West is not in your ward, and at ward meetings I've been to in your area, nobody's raised this with me, but obviously if since members in Tottenham Green have become concerned about Harrod West, you should obviously feel free to email me, and I can have a look at that. What I would say is we of course continue to talk to residents, and as members will know from cabinet meetings, tenants from the Love Lane estate were both involved in the procurement decision, were involved all the way along, and now tenants and leaseholders actually from the estate are sitting on a design panel and are actually working with the designers, with the architects, to design the new estate and their new homes in particular. So I'm very confident that not only are tenants significantly involved, but they are far more involved than members would see in many other Labour councils. Councillor Carter, in terms of your questions on the housing strategy, this is not a discussion on the housing strategy. This is a discussion on Harrod West. But as you raised it, in terms of your particular wording question, I'm not sure I can answer that without looking at the document. What I would say is we are building the first council house in 25 years. I've met very happy tenants in the last 6 months who are moving in. We're building a further 85 through a partnership with Sanctuary Housing. As you'll know from reading this report this evening, hopefully, the High Road West itself will involve 191 new council houses being built. So if you're concerned about council housing, I hope you'll vote for this report. This report, in fact, will trigger the single biggest chunk of council housing built for 25 years. So I hope that allays your concerns.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Engert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Liberal Democrats are opposed to the recommendation in this report to dispose of council-owned land for the High Road West scheme. The Liberal Democrats called in the High Road West decision made by Cabinet in September, and we do not agree with the recommendation proposed tonight. In our view, the High Road West scheme shares many of the same problems as the Haringey development vehicle. Namely, the commitment to affordable and social housing is weak, with only 30% affordable housing on what is currently a council-owned site. Leaseholders on the Love Lane estate do not feel they're getting a fair deal. That there are fewer council homes or homes for social rent than originally planned. There are issues with density, size and quality of homes on the regeneration site, given the dramatic increase in the number of homes proposed, up from 1,400 to 2,500. Long-established local businesses will be moved out of the Peacock industrial site with no clear plan for their return. And the decision to select Lend-Lease, with their poor record on similar regeneration schemes such as Harrogate Estate in Southwark. I hope those in this chamber who share our concerns on this £1 billion scheme will vote with us to stop the disposal of the council land and this flawed scheme, which is remarkably similar to the HGV. Mr. Mayor, my colleagues and I ask we move to a recorded vote on the recommendations as per Rule 17.4 in the Council Procedure Rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I'm prepared to have a recorded vote, but you've asked some questions, so I'll allow Councillor Strickland to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Engert, for your question. I think the first thing to say is that the High Road West scheme is remarkably unsimilar to the Haringey development vehicle. It's a completely different arrangement. It's a completely different legal structure, and it's on one site. Now, obviously, the Lib Dems are perfectly free as the official opposition to oppose this, but when 70% of the people who actually live there want this to happen, and are happy with what's being agreed, and we're involved in the decision to pick Lend-Lease, and are involved in the design of the new estate and their homes. And I find it difficult, after 5 years of consultation with tenants who've repeatedly agreed with this, to understand why the Lib Dems have decided to oppose it in these terms this evening. One can only assume they're playing to the gallery, but on this side, well, and that side of the chamber, we believe in public service, not posturing. And we believe in listening to tenants, not just to noisy activists. We have given clear assurances on leaseholders. On issues like density, there are more homes, but of course members will know that the master plan agreed by Cabinet is for a much bigger site, so it's not fair to compare the two sites. There's continuing engagement with businesses, and as I said very clearly at Cabinet and at scrutiny, many more businesses are now being kept than was originally planned, which is fantastic. That's something that we've pushed for, and I'm very pleased that we have achieved. And as I said earlier, this will see the single biggest building of council homes to be managed by Homes for Haringey. This council has built for 25 years. On top of that, there's additional shared ownership housing made affordable to people on household incomes of 40 grand a year. And on top of that are 155 homes from Sadiq Khan's new affordable rent, which are well below the rents set by the pernicious Tory government. So I think this is a good scheme, agreed by tenants, and I'm happy to stand by it, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Strickland. I'm going to take two further questions, Councillor Bevan and Councillor Amin, and then I'm going to move to the vote. So, Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'm sorry I was late. As people are aware, these schemes are really quite complex, so I just want to put in front of everybody a few issues that the Council still has to resolve. I don't know whether that will alleviate some of your concerns. So there's a question of the public realm, the future public realm, including the Northern Park, whether it will remain as a public realm and who is actually going to pay for it. There's also the issue of the service charges on the new accommodation. Will they be really affordable, and will they be incurring a lot of costs of maintaining the new park? There's also an issue of the ground rents to be resolved. Where are the ground rents going to end up when they are paid? There's also the issue of the council land. When we build the council houses, is that land that is built on going to remain as freehold with the council? So there's still quite a number of issues that need to be resolved. It's a big project and it's really complex, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to put these issues into people's minds. Thank you very much.
I'll take the further question before I ask Councillor Strickland to respond and then go to the vote. So, Councillor Amin.
Can I pay tribute to Councillor Strickland for the work he's done with Northumberland Park councillors and residents and leaseholders at Love Lane. At every meeting and every resident I have spoken to who lives at Love Lane is in favour of the regeneration plans proposed by the council. So can I pay a tribute to you? In relation to the vote, the named vote, can I please ask for members to say their name, but also include the name of the ward they represent, please, because that makes a little bit more sense to people who are looking at the votes and where they're coming from.
Thank you very much. Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your question. So, Councillor Bevan, thank you very much. I think it's very helpful. There are a number of issues still to be decided, and as I said earlier, residents are sitting on panels to make those decisions. But it is important to say that service charges in these blocks that will be owned by the council and managed by Homes for Haringey will be calculated in the same way. Now, obviously, if they have different services to the current blocks, the service charge might be different, but the calculation is exactly the same. And also important to clarify that the freehold does stay with the council for the council blocks, which is really important. But as Councillor Bevan says, lots of other issues still to be discussed, and residents are very much involved in that. To thank Councillor Amin for her kind words, and also to thank the 3 Northumberland Park councillors, because in the last 5 years, all 4 of us have given up many evenings and weekends to talk to tenants and encourage tenants to properly get involved and to make really clear what they want. And it was good not only to see the tenant support, which meant that we'd got to something that tenants were pleased with, but actually that was tenant support on a very high turnout, which means that tenants were engaged, and the vast majority of tenants did take part in those consultations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Strickland. We now move to the vote, and I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to call out the names. And just to clarify, under the rules, it's just the names that are needed rather than the ward. I'm very sorry. Okay, so, Chief Executive.
So I will call each councillor's name in turn in alphabetical order, and then if you could say whether or not you are for, against or abstaining, then we'll record it. So I am not calling out the councillors for whom we have apologies recorded. Councillor Ajay gave apologies for lateness, but I believe is not here yet. Councillor Aisi. Councillor Amin.
For, and I represent Northumberland Park Ward.
Councillor Arthur.
For.
Councillor Basu. Councillor Beecham.
Against.
Councillor Berryman, I believe, is not here. Councillor Bevan. Councillor Barbara Blake.
For.
Councillor Mark Blake, I believe, is also not here yet. Councillor Claire Bull.
For.
Councillor Carter.
Clive Carter, against.
Councillor Christofides.
For.
Councillor Connor.
Against.
Councillor Demirci.
For.
Councillor Diakides. Councillor Doran.
For.
Councillor Engert.
Against.
Councillor Goldberg.
For.
Councillor Griffith. Councillor Hare.
Bob Hare, against.
Councillor Cober.
For.
Councillor Mallet.
For.
Councillor Jennifer Mann.
For.
Councillor Stephen Mann.
For.
Councillor McShane.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Morris.
For. Sorry. Apologies. I'm very sorry. Just to clarify, that's against. Sorry.
Councillor Newton.
Against.
Councillor Opoku, I believe, is not here yet. Councillor Osbeck.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Peacock.
For and proud to represent Northumberland Park.
Councillor Reith.
For.
Councillor Ross. Councillor Sahota.
For.
Councillor Strickland.
For.
Councillor Tucker. Councillor Vanya.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Weston is not here. Councillor Wright.
I can now declare that 27 for, 8 against, so the recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 15, which is the Haringey debate. And to remind members of the process, this debate will be introduced by a member of the Liberal Democrat group, who will have up to 10 minutes to introduce the item. And once that's been taken, we will then start the debate of up to 45 minutes, So I would like to invite Councillor Engert to introduce the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have no speakers this evening because, once again, our debate occurs so late on the agenda. However, given the scrutiny and very public debate of social and affordable housing in our borough, I'm sure that even without a guest speaker, we will have a very well-informed debate tonight. The Liberal Democrats believe that one of the most pressing problems facing this borough is the lack of affordable and social housing. Rents in the private sector have risen, leaving private renters with little money left at the end of the month for other essentials. And the Council's temporary and emergency housing bills have also risen. In fact, they're one of the biggest pressures on the Council's budget. What I find most shocking is that a Labour Council is so comprehensively failing to address this most serious of issues in this borough. The evidence of this failure is clear. According to page 2 of the AMR report for Haringey for 2015-2016, no new affordable housing units were completed in 2015-16. Page 21 of the latest AMR also states, over the planned period to date, 32% of conventional housing has been delivered as affordable housing, way below the Council's target and way below the Mayor's target. Only a handful of the planned 250 new council homes have been built. 29 million of the right to buy receipts were handed back to the government because this Labour cabinet failed to use them on new council homes. 5,544 homes have planning consent but have not been completed. To make matters worse, a good number of the affordable homes that have been delivered are not what many people would consider to be affordable, as they are for particular groups and therefore not open to most people. Pretoria Works and Prothero House are both extra care homes and are both listed as providing affordable homes. While these homes are clearly needed, I think it is important to note that these developments account for roughly half of the 211 affordable homes built in Haringey in 2016-17. So the headline figure that is often used by the Labour Cabinet member of 72% of homes being affordable does not stand up to much scrutiny. The figure only applies to major build and is on habitable room basis, not on unit basis. It includes the 2 extra care homes, and when you look at all conventional housing, not just major schemes, the actual percentage of affordable is 32. Is this a record to be proud of? I think not. I'm sure Councillor Strickland will claim the Haringey development vehicle and the very similar High Road West scheme are the solution to the problem. But I respectfully and completely disagree. As you all know, Haringey Lib Dems are united in our opposition to the Haringey development vehicle. We oppose the £2 billion privatisation of council property, including homes, commercial property and libraries, because it will not deliver the social housing and genuinely affordable housing this borough so desperately needs. We have thousands of people on the council waiting list, and the HGV will not build a single new council home. It is massively risky and relies on a developer with an incredibly poor record on delivering council homes and homes for social rent. Tenants and leaseholders will not have enough protection and have not been consulted properly on the HGV itself. I would also remind everyone in this chamber that the Cabinet's negotiating skills on this contract were so weak they haven't put into the contract basic requirements such as no pour doors on social blocks or even a break clause so the Council can withdraw from the contract. If the Labour Cabinet want to rely on the private sector to deliver more homes, they need to get better negotiating skills. It is concerning that it is only after much public pressure and a campaign by the Lib Dems that we have finally got proposals for Hornsey Town Hall that include some affordable housing. Surely delivering affordable homes, along with the restoration of the hall, should have been one of the key requirements for the bidders to meet, not an afterthought. I'm sure some of the Labour Cabinet will now tell me there's no alternative to the HGV and the private sector. I know that many people in the gallery, and indeed some councillors on Labour's benches, know there are alternatives. They may be slower, but they give the council much more control and would enable us to deliver the council and social homes people need, while allowing the council to reduce the temporary accommodation bill. For example, Sutton's wholly owned development company, a company which is owned by the council and the council alone, is building council homes and indeed some shared ownership homes. They are delivering these homes on a site-by-site basis, employing small local construction companies and are developing a regeneration charter with the local communities. Those communities will be given an important role in forming the proposals from the very beginning, not simply consulted at the end. Leaseholders being offered flat swaps, they're not being offered a percentage of new build flats, and tenants are given the right to return. There will be no poor doors in Sutton. That is how Lib Dem Council delivers affordable housing, by working with residents to deliver homes for local people, not homes for developers to line their pockets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anger. We now start the debate, and we have up to 45 minutes. And I would like to invite members to speak for up to 3 minutes. I have a list here of people who have indicated they wish to speak. So if I call them out and they still wish to speak, then if they can start speaking. So, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I welcome this debate on Haringey's social and affordable housing crisis. Housing problems are the most challenging ones that I think we face in our casework. And Haringey has got 3,000 families in temporary accommodation, and across England those figures have been increasing every quarter since 2011. And homelessness costs the public sector in excess of £1 billion a year, much of it going on temporary accommodation. And the failure to tackle the housing crisis just doesn't make economic sense. And it also, as well as the financial cost, results in huge stress for those families concerned. And while the need for social housing goes up, the supply has been going down. The right to buy sales went up hugely after the Tory Lib Dem coalition increased the discount. But the rules on using those receipts made it impossible for councils to build those replacement homes. If you look at recent government announcements on housing, you might think that they had recognised the need to act on housing, but the reality is somewhat different. The government announced £2 billion extra for social and affordable housing, but the small print in the Office for Budget Responsibility report said that much of it wasn't new money at all, it was simply being recycled from other schemes. The Chancellor did announce some relaxation on the housing borrowing cap for councils in high-cost areas such as this. But nothing is guaranteed. Councils will have to bid to borrow more, and in any case the scheme doesn't start until 2019. So it seems clear that government policies will not provide the homes that are desperately needed in Haringey. And so this council has to act within the constraints that it faces. And the challenge is huge. The draft London plan, which came out last week, gives a revised target of over 1,900 completions every year. So that's why we've embarked on the High Road West scheme, which the Liberal Democrats opposed. And the housing crisis is also why we are proposing and supporting the HDV. It's been the subject of a lot of misinformation and scaremongering, but it's about delivering homes for Haringey residents. And in my view, doing nothing on housing is just not an option. I'm not prepared to say to those who are in desperate need of housing that it's all too difficult, we can't do anything. The time for debating this is over and we need to have some action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mitchell. Can I call upon Councillor Jennifer Mann?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I understand a homeless strategy and rough sleeping strategy are going to Cabinet in March. Meanwhile, I have to say that as well as the 3,000 families in temporary accommodation, there are also around 350 individuals homeless in Haringey at any one time. We know that street homelessness has been getting worse and figures rising each year, and also that the government changes to housing benefit has played a key role in that increase. But we have to recognise that there's great work being done by charities and voluntary groups to support people. Carys, Haringey and Tottenham, St Mungo's outreach teams, Muswell Hall Churches and Community Kitchen are just some I'm aware of locally. Crisis, a national charity, do excellent year-round work to supporting individuals in health, education, training courses, as well as housing, and is a true beacon in the field of supporting and changing the lives of homeless citizens. All People, All Places is a charity that offers year-round drop-in support as well as winter night shelters across our borough and across Enfield, and is the charity I chose during my mayoral year. And I have supported the charity by serving breakfast and preparing and meals since before I became a councillor. Homeless, down and out and rough sleepers are just some of the terms that are used to describe people who don't actually have a home. But I think working person who has no home is actually far more accurate for many. For example, last winter in another shelter in a church hall just not far from my home, when guests were asleep, a leak sprung in a cross-ceiling water pipe. So the volunteer climbed up to inspect the leak and was joined by a guest, who then went out to his parked work van, collected his full plumber's toolkit, fixed the leak, and then went back to his camp bed for the rest of the night. He was up and dressed and off to work sharply the next morning. We have to recognise this is another reality of homeless today. Homes are beyond many people's reach and means. I firmly believe, given all these, all the facts and figures of this, that the Finnish House First system is where we need to progress to. Housing First is central to the national homelessness strategy in Finland, which is the only EU state not in the midst of a housing crisis. It's completely different to traditional approaches of night shelters and hostels, where people with complex needs or rough sleeping or who are given rapid access to their own property and don't have to somehow qualify it by proving that they're sane, sober, clean before they get housed. People then are given intensive support, but crucially, their tenancies remain secure. The evidence is quite amazing, with an 85 to 95% success rate compared with 15% before with the traditional system. They have effectively ended rough sleeping and homelessness in Finland and only need to retain 50 emergency beds in the whole country. And this is so much better than the problem they had 25 years ago. To sum up, Finland now treats formerly homeless people as normal citizens rather than as clients or patients by making sure housing is a basic social right. We could do that. We could do all of that, just as we know how to meet our borough's social housing needs. It simply is a matter of finding and securing funding. So meanwhile, I have to say we must continue to respect and support and work in partnership with all the care provided by charities for our homeless families and individuals, and work in partnership to continue to support our families and individuals in need. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call upon Councillor Carter?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason why I mentioned the two housing strategies earlier, one superseding the other, is that they seem to indicate a direction of travel in connection with council housing. My starting point this evening is Labour's 2014 manifesto, which is here. that pledged to build a relatively modest number of council homes, 250, but that hasn't happened. In the manifesto, there was no hint of the HDV, and yet that project has consumed much officer time and attention and money. The HDV is too big, too risky, and too complicated. But we're told either there is no alternative to it, or perhaps more reasonably, what would you do? The first and most urgent thing to do is to halt the HDV in the same way that one would seize an emergency brake on a runaway train heading for a broken bridge. The second thing to do is to listen to our neighbouring boroughs to the north, the east and the south. They're all Labour and they've all gone about regeneration in a different way. For example, Waltham Forest plans to deliver 2,000 new council homes over the next 5 years by redeveloping council-owned sites. By contrast, we're the only council in the country of any stripe to put its housing into a privately owned joint venture. Let us take a current example of housing policy applied on the ground, the affordable housing at Hornsey Town Hall. The council has had control over all aspects as to how to sell it. It is, or was, our land, our listed building, and our choice to dispose of it in the first place. Rather than specify our expectations at the outset of the disposal process, the council decided either to leave it to the market or having conditions. The idea of having conditions was simply overlooked. Thus, we had no requirement for a minimum level of social or affordable housing, and the council has had to scrabble about to try to impose such conditions. We may end up with a large number of luxury flats and, by area of new build, only 6% for so-called affordable accommodation. Further, there is no restriction on off-plan sales, which means that the Cayman Islands domiciled company could market the flats in Hong Kong, where they are registered, or wherever overseas they please. This is the actual practice, and it lacks competence. Labour are failing to deliver the homes local people need.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call upon Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, no new council homes for 25 years. Actually, I'm not talking about Haringey. I'm talking about Sutton. That's the Lib Dem record there. If we look at social housing across the board, there's fewer homes for social rent were completed between April and September this year with grant funding than in any comparable period on record. It's 199 homes over 6 months of this year. In fact, the number of social rented homes has fallen by 97% since 2010. 2010, 36,700 new socially rented homes were completed. 2016-17, 1,102. Now, I probably don't have to remind people what happened in 2010, but I will. It was the Tory government propped up by the Liberal Democrats, and their first action pretty much was to slash the money, the social housing grant, which pays for council houses. So I'm not going to take any lessons from the opportunists sitting down that end of the room. I was interested to look at the house prices at the moment in Tottenham and in Wood Green. Staggering, actually. It's the average, according to a couple of the agents' websites I looked at. Tottenham house prices have gone up 25% in the past year, 600% since 1997. Wood Green, average flat price in Wood Green is £400,000. in Tottenham it's £374,000 and a house is £625,000. Now, that is the challenge. That is the challenge that we're facing after 7 years of this government, which has outsourced, privatised provision of social housing, with the viability loophole written in so that the profits are secured, but the social housing contribution is not. Again, I'm not taking any lessons from the Lib Dems. We look at the London plan that's just been published by the Mayor. Now he's set out a challenge of just under 2,000 new homes a year for Haringey. It's actually up 500 homes on the previous plan. So we've got a huge demand for housing. We've got prices going up and up in this borough. At the same time, as an aside, wages are stagnating. In many parts of this borough, the net wage is lower now than it was in 2010.
Wind up, please, Councillor.
2010 again. What happened there? Now, we either intervene and invest to do something about that broken market, or we do nothing. And my vote is we do what we can to invest, to tackle the housing market and provide, as we are doing, and we will do more, the affordable homes people in this borough need.
Thank you, Councillor. I call upon Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wanted to put this debate in a sort of slightly wider context. Firstly, by picking up on some of the issues that others have picked up on, which is to say, this is a London-wide housing crisis that we face. There are in excess of 50,000 families across our city in temporary accommodation. 70% of all families nationally living in temporary accommodation are within London. So I'm not sure it's helpful to to hone in on a single borough and suggest that issues or deficiencies in terms of the crisis in this borough can be attributed to the borough alone. We have to look in much wider terms. We know that we are a city with a growing population. So in the last 20 years, we've seen a 25% rise in the number of residents living in Haringey, but only a 15% rise in the number of homes that there are in our borough. So the answer has to be, in addressing this crisis of supply, to build more. That means building higher, building denser. It means using the council's own land to build. And actually, if we decide that we want to face into this challenge, if we decide that politics is about doing the right thing, then that requires a degree of pragmatism. It requires a problem-solving approach. It requires us to not just retreat into simple generalisms or ideological comfort. We see in our city a crisis of affordability. If we look back 20 years, first-time buyers, the average price of their property was 2 times their earnings. Look at that figure today. It's over 10 times. No wonder people cannot get on the housing ladder. And if we look across our city more generally, 80% of the homes that we're building are affordable to only 8% of our population. So we have to do things differently. We have to have imaginative solutions. We have to come out of our comfort zone. And that means exploring options like the HDV, proceeding in that way. It means working in the way that we are in High Road West. And I have to say, I find it really disappointing that back in 2015, when the Haringey development vehicle procurement commenced, there wasn't a single member on either side of this chamber who argued against it. In fact, the only questions, because I looked this morning, the only questions at that Cabinet meeting that decided on that were 2 questions. They were from Councillor Wenger, and one was about whether the right to buy would apply, and Councillor Strickland confirmed it wouldn't, and the second was whether Wood Green Library would be consulted on before falling within the development plans. And I just worry a little bit about courage in political debate and where that exists. But let's come back to the crisis that we see, the crisis of affordability. The crisis of affordability is also in our private rented sector. There are 2 million Londoners now living in that sector. There are more children living in the private rented sector in London than in the social sector. So we have to work harder. We have to fight for longer tenancies. We need to ensure that tenants are secure in terms of the rent increases that they face, and we need to deal with criminal landlords, and hopefully we'll get onto a question and deal with that later this evening. There are no easy answers here, but I ask that people think about the sorts of solutions that are possible, that they leave their ideological baggage at the door, and that they do the right thing by the residents of this borough.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call upon Councillor Hare?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I'm going to say is something about the how of Haringey's approach to regenerating its housing. There's a multitude of questions that have been raised about the HDV by many different voices. In High Road West, the Peacock Estate, with its 24 long-established businesses, will go, quite possibly from Haringey, because the new business spaces won't accommodate them, and perhaps forcing their closure, underlining an uncompromising and you might say uncaring view of how to achieve development that is shared by almost no other council. There are many aspects of the High Road West scheme that apply equally to the HDV and have been questioned cross-party and by outside organisations, not to mention the leader of the Labour Party in his conference closing speech. Underlying all of the flawed logic is not building homes for the waiting list, because that isn't going to happen, but rather the aim of securing council tax receipts with a lower proportion of the costs of social tenants, as a proportion of the total, that is. What does that amount to, other than social cleansing with financial upgrading for the council? Other councils, Lib Dem and Labour, have taken quite different approaches. In the case of Sutton, a week ago, we were privileged to hear from Councillor Jane McCoy about, she chairs the Housing, Economy and Business Committee. It's interesting and relevant that they have chosen to consider those three issues together so that conflicts are avoided. My colleagues have mentioned several aspects of Sutton's approach to setting up a 100% council-owned housing company. I'll mention a couple more. Any profits will be invested in locally, not shared with a private company. And also that green infrastructure will be a priority. In contrast, Haringey has chosen the maximum density in its plans for Wood Green. Sutton has sought advice originally about how they should approach negotiations. The first and most fundamental advice, Councillor McCoy said, was, do not sell your land, it is your best asset, and the private sector will work with you nonetheless. This council has put all our eggs, or proposes to, into one basket instead of being able to negotiate and choose the best developer for a particular site. I predict we will be walked over. Giving so much away inevitably results in a lack of control. If we, which is you, want to achieve housing that benefits the people who live in the places where it's to be built, who work there, have businesses there, and that is built with people's support, it is we, you, who have to stand up for people, so that we, which again means you, completely control what happens in the longer term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call upon Councillor Doran to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak as someone who is renting in this borough and struggling to afford to rent in this borough, but also as someone who chairs the planning committee and has had the honour of doing so for the last couple of years. Being on this council since 2014, I've become accustomed to hearing the Liberal Democrats just complain about things without proposing solutions, and also about talking down the record of this borough. So I just want to set some things straight. I think Councillor Mitchell has done a very good job in terms of setting out the constraints on local government to build housing. But actually within those constraints, Haringey has got a very good record. I think if we look at what's come before the planning committee, since 2011, 72% of units on major developments have been affordable units. 72%. I'll come to that. Beneath that level, 42% of all new homes in the borough since 2011 have been affordable. Now, it's a frequent criticism that affordable housing isn't genuinely affordable. We're not delivering any social rented homes. But actually, look at the data. Look at what we've delivered. 2,477 affordable homes in the last 10 years. Over half of these were low-cost rent. 910 at social rent levels. 410 at affordable rent. Now, people say affordable rent, what does that mean? It's 80%. That is not true. And in Haringey, we've worked very hard to ensure that's not true. Of one beds, they are 72% of market rent. 2 beds, 61% of market rent. 3 beds, 51% of market rent. Tell a family looking for a new home, a 3-bed home, that 51% market rent isn't a massive, massive difference to their lives. They won't believe you. So I think what we need to understand is that Haringey does have a good record, but as we've heard put so well, there are constraints and we have to do more. We have to be imaginative. We have to look for new solutions. I would say people have quoted various things tonight. I'd say look at what the homelessness charity Shelter has said. Look at what the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has said. Joint ventures, such as the HDV, they are common. They are a way to meet the needs of those who need to be housed, and they are a way to bring more funding into a council. That's a good thing because that's more funding for public services that our voters rely on. So I would urge people, as Councillor Cobra has said, to leave the ideological baggage at the door and let's get on with finding solutions, not just complaining.
Thank you, Councillor Dorrock. Can I call upon the Cabinet Member for Housing, Regeneration and Planning to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mann. Thank you for people's contributions this evening. Just to pick up some of the main points that have come up and talk about what we have done in the last 4 years. First, as colleagues have said, on affordability, we hear from the opposition in this room, we hear from the local press that no affordable housing has been built. But actually, between 2011 and 2016, the Mayor of London's figures shows that we built more affordable housing than every other borough, bar 3. So we're actually a leading borough in this city for building affordable homes. In that period, the London average was only 28% affordable. In Haringey, it was 38% affordable. I just Googled, actually, the Sutton percentage, Mr Mayor, which I've lost, but from memory it was 17%. So here we are, it is, in fact, it was 17%. So we will not take lectures from Lib Dem Sutton when they're building 17% affordable, when in the same period we built 38%. It just beggars belief, quite frankly. And as Councillor Doran said quite rightly, we've also taken the pernicious coalition government's affordable rents, which the Lib Dems voted for in Parliament, and we tried to push them down as much as we can in the borough. Now, that's something we have no formal power over, so it's really been myself, the leader, senior planners, the chair of planning, saying to applicants, do not charge these rents. Please take into account the needs of our residents, and we've been successful in pushing those rents down through our leadership. Councillor Carter asked about our manifesto. We said in our manifesto we would build 1,000 affordable homes by the election. We are currently on 983. And we will definitely hit and exceed that target by the election. Thank you. We have struggled. We've always been honest. I've been honest repeatedly in these meetings and at scrutiny that we have struggled to build the amount of council housing we would like to. But that is in large part because, as other colleagues have said, the Lib Dem Tory coalition government wrapped right to buy receipts in ludicrous amounts of red tape and have taken an axe to social housing finance, which meant that in 2011 the amount of money per home you got was cut by £100,000. So I'm proud that we've got Haringey building council homes for the first time in 25 years, and we would have built hundreds more had the Lib Dems and the Tories not desperately tried to stop us doing that. On homelessness, we've doubled our homelessness outreach service, picking up Councillor Mann's points. We've also created 2 new emergency accommodation facilities, which means that we, as a London borough, do not have a single resident in B&B. That's very unusual in London, and we've insourced the emergency accommodation. We've also led, I've led, with colleagues from both parties actually, a supported housing review, because we talk a lot about affordability generally, but we forget older people, and we forget LGBT young people fleeing violence, and we forget people with disabilities who need independent living support. So I know Councillor Engert said, well, why do the affordable figures include some of these homes? But actually, my argument is fairly straightforward, which is that older people need affordable housing too. And we count those homes quite legitimately. Then, if we look at regeneration, we continue to spend about £40 million a year in our own council homes, the 17,000 that we own, and we've heard about the success we've had, despite the cuts in pushing for high levels of affordable in our regeneration schemes. We were proud to win the biggest housing zone funding from the Mayor of London, the whole of London, £100 million to build homes in Tottenham Hale, 40% affordable, and to help the High Road West scheme. It's not true that there aren't other major councils working in partnership through things like the development vehicle. The Guardian, which had been fond of attacking us recently, actually did a helpful two-page spread welcoming Sheffield's housing company, which has exactly the same legal structure. That's journalists for you. To conclude, Mr Mayor, we cannot deny, and I think it's frustrating that the opposition have not talked about this, we cannot deny that since 2010, the government, both the governments, have created a perfect storm. Housing benefits been frozen in real terms, which is why, as Councillor Mann said, working people are increasingly living in hostels and living under bridges on the North Circular and being rescued by our teams. It's just appalling in 2017. When we need more social housing, the Tory Lib Dem government cut the grant per home by £100,000. Just appalling. And when we're desperately trying to spend right-to-buy receipts to build affordable homes, government rules when we have to give most of it back. Completely unacceptable. So, as Councillor Wright said, far from taking lectures from the Lib Dems, it would be nice if just for once, Mr Mayor, they would accept that their government actually made things worse. We wouldn't be having this horrendous debate tonight about all these awful problems in housing had the Lib Dem government showed more leadership and actually got the Tories to do something about housing rather than slash the budget.
Wind up now, please,
so
Councillor.
this is, affordable housing is challenging. It has been very difficult given the cuts. But I'm proud that, as the leader said, we haven't just sat back and said this is all a bit too difficult. We haven't said, as Councillor Engert said, well, let's pick a slower solution. People in crisis want a slower solution, do they? We've actually built, in hard times, one of the best records in London for affordable housing. More to do, but I think we can be really proud of what we've done in really difficult times.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Engert to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to go back over a few points. On the HGV, when Councillor Coburn mentioned when we were first presented with the idea of an HGV, I think the detail was entirely lacking. Sorry? Right. I think we had no idea what was involved at that stage, and it was only when we started to scrutinise. I remember Councillor Brabazon saying it was full of fluffy aspirational words, that report, the original reports, and it was only through scrutiny when we started to ask questions, many of which were never answered properly, the true nature and risk of what we were entering into. On the figures for 2011, now I don't have a computer in front of me, but I seem to remember quite a large number of the 2011 affordable was student accommodation. I don't have anything with me to check, but I have quite a good memory, and I think that was largely bulked out by students. On the right to buy, Labour didn't reverse the Conservative policy when they were elected in 1997. They kept right to buy. And you're criticising Sutton for not having built. You didn't, from 1989, for 26 years, there was no social housing built by this council in Haringey. So to continue, I think it's a shame so many Labour councillors are missing this evening. We will have so many important housing issues on the agenda, including High Road West and this debate. I would have thought they'd be very keen to attend. Perhaps the missing Labour councillors are too exhausted from all the infighting at their selection meetings. I hope those councillors who are here have found the debate informative. And I think we all have criticisms of the Conservative government and the fact we can't keep right to buy. So I think there's quite a lot of common ground that we have about the attitude of government and not letting us borrow as much as we probably could easily do. Although the Labour Cabinet member and I clearly disagree on how to deal with the problem of lack of affordable and social homes built in Haringey, the Lib Dems do believe that the example of Sutton, which is Lib Dem run, was right to have a wholly council-owned development company. I was also fortunate, together with Councillor Hare, to meet Councillor Jane McCoy, the chair of Sutton's Housing Committee. She was scathing in her criticism of Haringey Development Vehicle and very concerned about the risks and failure to deliver council homes. Concerns I obviously share. She described it as a bargain basement sell-off of council assets and said it was extremely worrying that the Labour Cabinet was giving up valuable land and income from commercial property. As I've said, they've taken a completely different approach in Sutton. Council housing being built with a combination of housing revenue account money, increased borrowing headroom and right to buy receipts. They're encouraging an investment and development into the borough by finding the right developers and land who will work with the community for the community. And perhaps most importantly, they have a housing development company 100% council owned. Housing priority is given to Sutton residents, and any profits made are reinvested in the home building. It might be a smaller programme, but that doesn't make it wrong. It's a model that we should be interested in. And I think somebody else mentioned Sheffield. That is a far smaller programme than is happening with the HGV. The reason also that they're not building so much is they don't have as much land as we are giving to the HGV. The Labour Cabinet keeps saying there is no alternative to the HGV, but there is, and a simple one. Build more council homes using the development company owned by the council, not a corporation. And where do you think the money is coming from? The GLA has given the council 62 million for the local housing zone to build homes. We have 30 million headroom in the housing revenue account, and we have right to buy receipts, 29 million of which the Labour Cabinet handed back to the Treasury. And we would have 33 million by scrapping the shiny new council offices. And we have our ability to borrow. I think we could build quite a few council homes with that.
Thank you, Councillor. That concludes the debate, and I would like to thank everyone for their participation. And we move on to item 16, Annual Carbon Reduction Report. And I call upon the Cabinet Member for Economic Development, Social Inclusion and Sustainability.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is now the 7th annual carbon report, and it has been my privilege to present every single one. As many of you know, this will be my last. And what I like most about this annual carbon report is that we've heard a lot in this chamber tonight about different levels of ambition and people, whether they're prepared to put themselves out there for something that they truly believe in or whether they want to stick to a safer road. There seems to be arguments about whether things can be done, whether they're too big or too small, whether there are possibility or not. But I'd say tonight, when you look at the carbon report, it is absolute evidence that politics is about making the art of the impossible absolutely possible. It's about putting your principles on the line and making a commitment to make things happen. And it is about making yourself accountable for the promises you make to the public and making sure that they are not empty. We said, and Claire Coburn signed this pledge when she first became leader, that we would reduce our emissions by 40% by 2020. Today I'm presenting a report that says on a per capita basis we have already done that and that we are on course to hit 40% by 2020 in absolute terms, which I have to say, when I first presented this report, I did not believe would happen. I would say this is a 2-year lag. So while we're sitting in 2017, this is 2015 data, we have 5 years more to close 16%, and today it is great that I can say to you today that we have reduced emissions by a further 3% in the last recorded year, meaning that we've now reduced emissions by a total absolute amount of 29% from our 2005 base. Taking into account population growth, we are doing better than our neighbouring boroughs, which is even more impressive when you consider that we were the 3rd lowest producing borough in London in emissions. And I would say, and I should say this point, had the coalition not bolted on their commitment to decarbonising the grid, I should imagine that we'd be doing a lot better. And I'm sure at some point in this evening, Councillor Hare will come back on that very point. Across the borough, we have 2,200 barrels producing 540,000 kilowatts of energy. And now, what I want to present today is the second report that you'll see in your pack, which is about the future. And I have to commend Councillor Naton Doran for leading what's truly a quite visionary piece of work. To move beyond 40-20, 40% emissions reduction by 2020 to be the first borough to reduce our emissions to zero carbon emissions by 2050. And the challenge that Natan was given was to say, not just how can we do regeneration, but how could we do regeneration differently? How could we make sure that we didn't just get the same kind of lazy approach to building homes and to building density? And again, I found it really fascinating to hear the opposition say today that we were not green because we're pro-density. Well, pro-density and being pro-city is being pro-green. And when you look at the report, and I feel really sad when you've not written a report, you say that we're lacking vision, but tonight we're accepting a recommendation to have a green grid across the entire borough that guarantees, that makes sure we've got livable, open and green spaces to make sure that this is not just an urban borough, but a livable urban borough. That is a vision that this council and this leadership can be absolutely proud of. And within this document, there's countless of other really, truly visionary recommendations we've accepted. 49 out of 71 have been accepted in their entirety. 16 have been partially accepted. And I want to read the words of Andrew Gould, the chair, who said, "It takes a major slice of courage for a leading local authority to put its sustainable development vision and credentials up to review by a group of built environment experts." Yet that is exactly what this council has done. And when we go forward, I really hope that people will stick to the commitments that we've made into this report, making sure that major developers sign up to the Innovation Hub if they want to build in a borough, to make sure that the building materials they use are the best in class, that the buildings that they build are best in class, and that they seek to further reduce the carbon footprint of both our residents, our commerces and our transport infrastructure. I think that's all I have to say. I think it's an exemplary record. I hope the work continues. I don't think it's something that's nice to do. I think it's something we have to do, and it's something we have to do now. There are difficult choices ahead. This report talks about waste, and I want to know why. We look at things like the incinerator that's due to be built in Edmonton. Why are we creating something with such a massive demand on it? We need to be making sure that it's much smaller, much more sustainable, and focused on reducing waste. And again, I hope next year's leadership of this council, whoever that may be, will make sure that they deliver on that commitment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goldberg. Councillor Doran's indicated.
Thank you. I just want to be quite brief about this. I think many of you will know that climate activism is what got me involved in politics in the first place. It got me involved in politics in the first place because I think it's, in the long term, one of the biggest threats to human life on this planet and all life on this planet. We have a responsibility to deal with it. I also think that climate change, in the way it impacts us, it hurts the poorest hardest. That is true in this country and true all over the world. And ultimately, I just want to use this opportunity actually to just praise Councillor Goldberg, because I was aware, before I was involved with the Labour Party, before I was a Haringey councillor, I was aware of the work that Haringey were doing on carbon. And I've met people from all over the Green movement who have paid tribute to the work that Haringey has done. We've always been first on 40-20, on 0-50, setting out our ambitions here. The Deputy Mayor for London, Shelley Rodriguez, who works under Sadiq Khan, came to the launch of the Zero by 2050 report and said, "You're going further than Sadiq Khan is." And it's an inspiration. We want to see more boroughs do it. So I just want to pay tribute to what Joe has done. He's fought tirelessly for the Green movement, but what he's also done is been very, very clear, unapologetic, that this isn't just about climate change, it's about inequality and addressing inequality. And that means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to other people here in this chamber. What I would do as well is just to echo whoever it is in this chamber after May 2018. I think this goes beyond party politics. I said that in my maiden speech here a few years ago. This goes beyond party politics. We have a responsibility to take action on climate change and protect those who are impacted. I really, really hope the Council in future upholds this great record.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any further questions? No. Okay. Are the recommendations agreed? They are agreed. I now move on to item 17 to answer questions. I've accepted the responses to written questions admitted as late business, and we now have 6 oral questions from members. 30 minutes are available for this item, and can I ask Councillor Amin to put her question to the Cabinet Member for Communities?
Does the Cabinet Member for Communities share my concerns about the level of discrimination and anti-Muslim hate faced by Muslim communities across the UK, as reported in the most recent Runnymede Trust report called Islamophobia Still a Challenge for Us All?
Thank you. Islamophobia manifesting in any form of discrimination or anti-Muslim hatred is completely unacceptable and goes against Haringey's proud history of being one of London's most diverse boroughs. Unfortunately, in Haringey, like many other boroughs, there's been an increase in Islamophobic crime. In the year just gone, 61 incidents were reported from 2016 to 2017, compared to 41 incidents the year previous. We know still this doesn't constitute an accurate picture of what's going on here in Haringey, because there's still vast underreporting. As far as the Runnymede report is concerned, we support the recommendation for a need of a common definition for Islamophobia. This will signal the recognition of Islamophobia as an issue and help to inform the basis of the response. The report also recommends for public officials to strongly challenge hate speech and harmful discriminatory stereotyping. And this is a call that's echoed by the community, and it was further echoed 2 weeks ago when we launched the Multi-Faith Forum.
I invite Councillor Amin to ask a supplementary question.
Will you, as the Cabinet Member, join me in condemning the President of the United States, Donald Trump, for retweeting his inaccurate and inflammatory video clips intended to whip up Islamophobia in the UK?
Those of us in this chamber have seen before what happens when political leaders whip up sentiments of hate. Whether that be Theresa May when she was in the Home Office with the Go Back Home vans, or Zach Goldsmith during the mayoral campaign. The retweeting of the video by President Trump is totally unacceptable, and it goes against what we believe and we live by here in Haringey. And I'm sure members in this chamber will join me in publicly condemning his behaviour and continue to show political leadership to stand shoulder to shoulder with our Muslim brothers and sisters.
Thank you. I offer a supplementary question to a Liberal Democrat member. No? Okay. I therefore offer the further supplementary to a Labour member. No? Thank you very much. I now move on to question number 2, Councillor Ingot.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is an oral question for the Cabinet Member for the Environment, who's not here. But it was how many residents have signed up to the charged green waste collection service, please?
As of last week, it was 3,600.
Thank you. Would you like to ask a supplementary?
These charges were poorly thought through, and it's clear you won't have the 12,000 households needed to make the saving you expect. Will you reverse this proposal?
I'm not sure where the opposition leader has her information from, but my understanding is that we're ahead of predictions in terms of the sign-ups at this point in time.
I now offer a Labour member the right to ask a supplementary. No? Any further from the Liberal Democrats? No? Thank you very much. Question number 3 from Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the absence of the Cabinet Member for the Environment, I'd like to ask the Leader to comment on proposals to improve conditions for tenants in the private rented sector in Harrogate.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Just to say, about a third of households in Haringey live in the private rented sector. It's a very fast-growing sector in terms of where people are living. As I said in an earlier contribution, there are more children now across London living in the private rented sector than in social sector, and that's why it's so important to focus on the standards and quality, particularly at the bottom end of the market, where changes to the local housing allowance, both through the pegging of local housing allowance to the bottom third of the market rather than median level, and the freeze in local housing allowance has meant that people are consigned to lower quality accommodation. So that's why we're concerned about this. We know that half of the private rented sector properties in the borough are houses in multiple occupation, and that's why Cabinet last month agreed to launch a public consultation on the proposal to roll out a licensing scheme across Haringey for all HMOs, and to complement that scheme with a similar licensing scheme, a selective licensing scheme for non-HMO privately rented properties in particular super output areas about which we're very concerned. Ultimately, I should say that licensing can't deal with every issue that occurs in the private rented sector, but it will help us to improve housing conditions, to reduce property-related fly tipping and antisocial behaviour, and to increase and promote good landlords in the borough.
Thank you. I invite Councillor Patterson to ask a supplementary.
Thank you. Newham Council has had a highly successful scheme. However, there are concerning reports that the Secretary of State may not agree for it to continue. Given this, how confident are you of getting approval from the Secretary of State?
So the issue for Newham is that they rolled out their scheme before the Secretary of State said that only 20% of an area in a borough could be covered by a selective licensing scheme. It means that they have some concerns that their scheme will be renewed. The Secretary of State has to approve that, as you said. I think in the case of Haringey, our selective scheme that we've got proposed does only cover 20% of the borough. It's highly focused on those super output areas where we know the greatest issues are in terms of mapping quite focus level antisocial behaviour, issues with waste management, issues with quality of the property. So we feel confident that we have a scheme that meets the Secretary of State's current requirements and that is sufficiently evidence-based to be approved.
Thank you. I'd like to offer a further supplementary question to a Liberal Democrat member. No? A further one from a Labour member? Thank you very much. Move on to question number 4, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Do you agree it's unacceptable that 67% of schools in the borough have been given a nil or limited assurance rating by the auditors this year? And what actions are being taken to improve support to schools in this area? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. 10 schools have been audited since the beginning of this financial year in April, and as you've said, of those 10, only 3 received a substantial assurance rating. This is obviously a cause for concern across the piece. We've taken a number of actions to ensure that schools are given increased financial support in the most appropriate way. For example, the Director of Children's Services has met with all schools who received a nil or limited assurance to discuss the issues, and we've also worked with Schools Forum to allocate £80,000 from the Schools in Financial Difficulty Fund to support financial processes and support for our schools and to help them get onto a stronger footing. Of course, what this situation is really reflective of is the wider problem of the unacceptable level of funding allocated to our school by central government. The provisional funding settlement for 2018-19 accords only a 0.5% cash increase across the piece, whereas we know that schools in our borough have faced real terms cuts of 10% over recent years. As such, Schools Forum and we are working carefully to look at how the national funding formula will apply from 2018 onwards. But there is a review group which has responded to both phases of the consultation on the national funding formula and also is looking at how to respond to the ongoing situation in the most sustainable way.
I invite Councillor Morris to ask a supplementary question.
Thank you. I understand the officer who provided accounting and finance support to schools was made redundant and the post was deleted. And then recently the post was recreated. So can you tell me what the redundancy payment was for a post that was clearly necessary? Thank you.
I'll write you on that, Councillor Morris.
I'd like to offer a further supplementary to a Labour member. Nope. Another supplementary from a Liberal Democrat member? Nope. Okay. We now move on to question 5 from Councillor Barbara Blake.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care and Culture update the Council about the work undertaken across the borough which led to Haringey achieving the White Ribbon Local Authority Award?
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Of all the work that I've undertaken since holding this portfolio, this is one I'm really, really proud of. It's work that involved partners, young people, in ending domestic violence within the borough. We've attracted, for the White Ribbon Award, let me tell you what it is. It's a project initiative that mobilises men and boys to work alongside women to end domestic violence. In November 2016, we set up a steering group compromising on voluntary organisations and local partners to raise awareness, train our residents in spotting domestic violence and reporting. Throughout the year, as we've recruited more male ambassadors, we've generated interest and support from key stakeholders within the community. In October 2017, we submitted the report and we were awarded full accreditation last week. And with all our partners, alongside the young people, it was a great event which was attended by some members in this room, and it's just a reflection of the kind of borough we live in and the kind of borough we want to, the kind of borough we want people to exist in.
Thank you. I invite Councillor Blake to ask a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can the Cabinet Member tell us about how young people have engaged with the White Ribbon campaign?
Young people have been integral from the beginning to the end of the campaign. In our early consultations, I think 500 people responded, of which 40% were young people, and of that 40%, I think it's something 90% of the young people were under the age of 18, because they recognised in themselves some of the behaviours that they were growing up seeing, and they wanted the council and with partners to tackle it at its root. Alongside those young people, we've had young people, young boys from St Thomas More, we've had the NCS Challenge, we've had Haringey Sixth Form College and our very own Youth Council in delivering a video and really leading the campaign to challenge those behaviours to which they see perpetuate domestic violence. So this is not the end. Although we received the White Ribbon Award, there will be a lot of work going forward which young people will lead and continue to lead.
Thank you. I'd like to offer a supplementary question to a Liberal Democrat member. No. Supplementary to a Labour member? Okay, thank you. So we're on to question number 6 from Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Question for Cabinet Member for Communities. Moped crime is increasing in Haringey, with a number of serious attacks recently in Highgate and Crouch End. Can you tell me what are the Council and Police doing to combat this problem, please?
The issue of moped-enabled crime not only impacts on areas like Highgate or Crouch End, but affects all parts of the borough, especially around transport hubs and areas of high footfall. Unfortunately, this is not unique to Haringey and is part of an escalating trend across all London boroughs, with significant increases in some of our neighbouring boroughs. To combat this, we're working alongside the police on an operation called Venice, which includes setting up a central operations call centre hub to coordinate police responses to moped-enabled crime across London, the use of the off-road police motorcycles, and the use of DNA sprays to detect offenders, and the use of stingers to reduce high-speed pursuits.
Thank you. Would you like to ask a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Do you agree that Sadiq Khan, the Labour Mayor of London, should not be closing police counters and stations in this borough?
I think I'll remind our members opposite that the cuts that we're facing here in this borough to public services and to the police stations were cuts instituted when they were in government with the Conservatives. It's part of a further wider cut. We've cut the Mayor has cut £600 million already, with a further £400 million to follow. But when we do speak to your residents in the wards that you do mention, the issues they come up with is not the closure of the police stations. They come up with issues around response times, to which end we're working with the Borough Commander and the Metropolitan Police. They are working hard to recruit more workers, train them up to ensure that when people do call the emergency services, they are responded to in a timely manner. They talk about having visible police officers. So to this end, you would have seen in the response to the consultation, we will have in each of our 19 wards, we will have a dedicated ward officer, we would have, 2 dedicated ward officers, a police community support officer in each of Haringey's 19 wards. And I think if you speak to any of your residents, they would say they would rather see visible police on the streets rather than behind a desk.
Thank you. Can I offer a further supplementary question to a Labour member? No, so I'll offer it to the Liberal Democrat member. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wondered, are you aware of the article that's online? I think it's a cycling website, which is an interview with a former bicycle and motorcycle thief. It's a lengthy article. I just saw it today, and at the end of that article there was practical advice for owners of bicycles and motorcycles to better secure their machines. I commend it to you if you haven't seen it. Thank you.
I would ask you to send me the article.
Thank you very much. That concludes the oral questions. Can we receive the answers to written questions as set out in the tabled paper, which I have accepted as late business? Thank you. We now move on to item 18, motions. We have 2 motions for debate. So first, can I ask Councillor Jennifer Mann to propose her motion?
Mr Mayor, I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to move this motion. Our post offices are in serious danger of disappearing from our high streets, and we must not let this happen. Post offices are a vital and loved cornerstone of our community, and they play an important role in the life of our borough, across all ages, family groups and backgrounds, and continue to do so even in this increasingly digital age. The Post Office has been serving the British public for over 500 years, but now their very survival of the Post Office is in question. In Haringey, there are plans to close Crown Post Offices and to transfer some to a franchise, including those in Crouch End, Muswell Hill and Haringey Green Lanes. Wood Green Crown Post Office has moved into new premises, and thanks to local campaigners, this has retained the existing staff who have trade union recognition to protect them and the services they provide. However, the fate of the others is in doubt, and we must fight to maintain them as Crown Post Offices. In 2012, following the Postal Services Act brought in by the coalition government, the Post Office was separated from Royal Mail, with the UK becoming the only major state postal operator in the world to divorce its retail arm from its mail operation. Then in 2013, the government privatised Royal Mail, with the Business Secretary, Vince Cable, not just selling this public service, but also allowing it to be sold on the cheap. Now our Crown Post Offices faced creeping privatisation. The Post Office has announced its plans for a closure and franchising programme, which means that almost 100 Crown Post Offices in the UK are vulnerable. The unions and local residents in our borough are working hard to stop these closure plans, which will only downgrade the service, and not only downgrade the service, but have far-reaching effects on local communities and their economies. As long as we have a Tory government, our public services are under constant threat. Let us put our communities and our people before profit and join in the campaign to defend our Crown Post Offices. We must act, and act decisively, to save this beloved institution and vital service. This means we need to campaign hard to stop our Crown Post Offices from disappearing. Therefore, I urge you all to support this motion and to fight these short-sighted measures which will have a detrimental effect on our local communities, decent local jobs and our local high streets.
Thank you, Councillor. I call on Councillor Mitchell to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pleased to second this motion. I took a look at the Post Office website, and that's got a heading on it, Modernising the Post Office. I always hate the use of that word, modernising. It's come to mean whatever the authors want it to mean. And it's aimed, I think, at making it difficult to oppose something. How could you oppose something that's modern? Well, I think we should be opposed to changes to our post offices if it means reduced services for local communities, post office closures, risks to jobs and terms and conditions for staff. Now, last year, the Post Office announced a new 10-year agreement to relocate more branches into WH Smiths. At the time, there were already 107 post offices in WH Smiths, and a further 61 were planned. And at the time, they said that all those proposals were subject to local consultation. Now, I've had experience of what that consultation actually means when they announced that the Wood Green Post Office would be moving into WH Smiths. It soon became clear that the consultation was not about whether it should move into WH Smiths, it was more about telling us that it was going to happen. And much the same has happened in Crouch End and Muswell Hill, where Universal Office Equipment has been given the franchise despite very strong local opposition. And you only have to look at the queues in the Wood Green Post Office to see the importance of the range of services that are provided there. People are not queuing up simply to buy stamps or to buy stationery. They want to take advantage of the extensive range of services that Crown post offices provide. Now, at the end of 2016, the government had a consultation about accessibility of post offices, the services available, the role of communities in the future of the network. And that was all about determining the funding that would be provided to post offices once the existing agreement with Post Office Limited expires in 2018. Now, the government still hasn't announced the outcome to that consultation, so I think it's very timely that we are debating this issue and that the Council uses this opportunity to make it clear to the government and to our local MPs that we support campaigns to protect our post offices and their staff. I move. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have received an amendment to this motion under the name of Councillor Enger, and I call upon Councillor Enger to move the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will speak briefly to propose the Lib Dem amendment to the Labour motion, and Councillor Newton will be seconding the amendment. I must say that it is the height of irony that the Labour group have chosen to propose this motion against the franchising, or to quote the motion, the privatisation of Crown post offices, while proposing one of the biggest privatisations in the country in the form of the Haringey development vehicle. The Liberal Democrats are not opposed to the involvement of the private sector, so long as the services and jobs are protected, which is why we have proposed the amendment to make it clear there are occasions when franchising of post offices can work with the proper safeguards in place. Safeguards that are glaringly missing from the Haringey development vehicle. We note that thus far, no post office in Haringey has closed as a result of this post office proposal, and we will fight to keep our local post offices open to protect services and jobs, something that our amendment makes clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Newton to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just formally seconding the amendment.
Thank you very much. We now have a debate of up to 30 minutes, and members may have up to 3 minutes for their contributions. So I call upon members to indicate that they wish to speak on this motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tucker.
It's quite enjoyable. I have to say it's quite a pleasure to see the Liberal Democrats come out of hiding, where they've been in the recent period, because of the debate being dominated by the HDV, and come out as proposing an amendment in favour of privatisation of post office services. It's not really a revelation, because we know what opportunists the Liberal Democrats are. The point about safeguarding being in place when services are transferred from the public sector to the private sector is a complete red herring, because everybody knows what happens when jobs and services move from the public sector to the private sector. They claim that jobs haven't been lost when services have moved from the public to the private. I tell you what has been lost: workers' pensions, workers' pay and workers' conditions. And those things will continue to be lost as long as this country is consumed by the process of neoliberalism and the steamroller of Thatcherite ideology. I note as well the hypocrisy of the Liberal Democrats in a changing rhetoric in the debate, because I note that the Liberal Democrats are now saying, because of the change in the composition of the Labour group, which is taking place as we speak because of the democratic process taking place inside Haringey Labour Party, instead of coming out and saying that they are against the HDV and trying to stop the HDV and therefore you have to vote Liberal, they're now saying that the way to stop momentum is to vote Liberal Democrat. An absolute exercise in hypocrisy. I fear that they will be sorely disappointed, because the view of the vast majority of the public in Haringey, as well as the rest of the country, as was shown by the fantastic response to Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto in the recent general election, the response in Haringey will be to massively support their newly selected Labour candidates on a promise of rolling back of privatisation and returning Haringey to socialist principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more contributions to the debate? If not, I'll ask Councillor Jennifer Mann to respond to the debate.
Thank you. The Liberal Democrats make the case for improved services, but the point is, if you take away the Crown Post offices and franchise them out, you lose the experienced staff and their know-how. Franchise post offices recruit inexperienced staff on lower wages with no trade union recognition or protection for their jobs. This can only lead to worse services for our communities, and I would urge you to reject the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now vote on the amendment. If it's agreed, we will vote on the motion as amended. If it is not agreed, we will vote on the original motion. So we're now voting on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against? The amendment is lost. We now vote on the original motion. All those in favour of the original motion, please show. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay. The motion is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to the second motion, and I ask Councillor Morris to propose her motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proposing the Lib Dem motion on tackling moped and motorcycle crime. Councillor Newton will be seconding it. The Lib Dems believe more needs to be done to tackle the scourge of this crime in our boroughs, roads and neighbourhoods. It is particularly important as there's been a significant increase in moped crime in Haringey, with a huge rise in phone and handbag snatches, and the gangs are using an increasing level of violence. In fact, police statistics show that between October 16 and September 9, 2017, there were 1,183 incidents of moped-related crimes in Haringey. And these crimes are affecting people across the borough. As reported in The Guardian, there was an acid attack in Tottenham. The victim was approached by two men on a scooter who sprayed corrosive substance in his face as they tried to steal his moped, presumably so they could then use the vehicle to commit a further crime. In Highgate, there was an attack in Gales Bakery. One of the victims suffered trauma to her gallbladder and had to have her organ removed. Another victim in Highgate had broken ribs and a broken hand because her bag and clothing was caught up in the moped and she was dragged along the pavement. We believe that more action needs to be taken to prevent motorcycle and moped theft so these criminals do not have vehicles to commit their crimes on. I've spoken to Karen Neal from the Red Army Riding Club and Tim Forthrop from the Motorcycle Action Group, as motorcyclists are often the victims of these crimes too. They want more investment for anchoring in motorbikes and will be looking at our ward budgets to provide this in Highgate. They believe there should also be a motorcycle crime czar or a deputy mayor in London. They're also asking for harsher sentencing and higher fines, and they were not adverse to stop and search as proposed in our motion. They have legitimate concerns about restrictions on pillion riders, so we support Labour's amendment, which removes this suggestion from our motion. I've also contacted the Borough Commander and asked to meet with her at Zenith Motorcycles in Tottenham so she can hear firsthand the effects of motorbike crime from the Vice President of the Red Army Motorcycle Club and also to meet victims of motorcycle crime. I've also asked to meet the Cabinet Member together with Haringey's Head of Community Service and are waiting to hear back on this. The Lib Dems have written to the Mayor of London asking for more action to tackle this type of crime, and I'm taking the recommendations and concerns from the motorcycle groups and victims to the Borough Commander and Sadiq Khan. This motion calls on the Mayor to take action now to reduce this threat on our borough's streets and protect law-abiding citizens and motorcyclists. I hope we can unite to tackle and vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morris. I call on Councillor Newton to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second the motion. My own ward of Forts Green has also been affected by the terrible blight of moped crime. Many local residents have told me they have had near misses, with their phones nearly snatched away by thieves on mopeds. Often these mopeds have been stolen from their owners and used to commit these violent crimes. The Lib Dems believe the police and the Mayor should be doing more to tackle moped crime, and one of the key ways to do this would be to stop these criminals from stealing mopeds with which to commit these attacks. That's why we believe that there should be widespread tagging of motorbikes and mopeds so stolen vehicles can be tracked and the thieves caught quickly before they can commit crimes. We also believe that there needs to be more points for motorcycle and moped owners to secure their bikes and reduce the chances of them being stolen. This motion also calls for boroughs across London to use dedicated police on motorbikes with the sole objective of pursuing moped-enabled criminals, which is something they are already doing in Camden with some success. The Lib Dems also believe that more needs to be done to improve coordination and cooperation between the different borough police teams in London, particularly on our borders with Islington and Camden, where many of these crimes are happening. This is easy to do, but could make a big difference. I hope we can all agree this issue needs to be dealt with, and I hope the motion will be supported by all councillors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I've received an amendment to this motion under the name of Councillor Raisi, and I call upon him to move the amendment.
I move this amendment. It will be seconded by Councillor Bull. As I said earlier on this evening, we are working with the Borough Commander and local police. And just to reiterate, they're using off-road police motorcycles to ensure that when a crime does happen, they can respond quickly. The use of DNA sprays to detect offenders and the use of stingers to reduce high-speed pursuits. I think also what this, the original motion has put fails to take into consideration is the Mayor of London has made repeated calls on the government for proper funding for policing, and which has fallen on deaf ears. But despite this, and as I said earlier, with our 19 wards receiving dedicated ward officers and a PCSO, and with officers with the newest technology in the communities, this will act as a further deterrent to this crime in the borough.
Thank you very much. I now call upon Councillor Claire Ball to second.
I second the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. We now have a debate for up to 30 minutes. Members may have 3 minutes to make their contribution. I've already had Councillor Peacock indicate.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'm really surprised that when this motion was moved, that Councillor Morris didn't mention that she'd been asked to withdraw the victim-blaming pillion part of the proposal, which she'd already agreed with Karen Neal. Karen Neal sent me quite a few emails today. She runs the motorcycle place in Tottenham. So I'll read out exactly what she's written. The measure appears to have no basis in evidence and would plunge thousands of law-abiding motorcyclists into transport poverty. The proposal smacks very strongly of victim blaming, since the first victim in this cycle is always a motorcyclist, whose only means of transport is stolen from them by thugs in order to commit further crime. The robberies of motorcyclists often involve extreme violence in the form of acid, hammers and machetes, which we've already heard. Ironically, the proposal will do nothing to deter criminals. They are already riding stolen machines without a licence or insurance, carrying banned weapons and engaging in violent crime. Police are often unable to chase them due to the top-down pursuit policies, but it would harm and further endanger hundreds of Haringey law-abiding riders. And as I said just before, after we raised considerable alarm and exerted pressure on the Lib Dems, the person proposing this motion, Councillor Morris, spoke to Karen Neal in her capacity as a community leader. Karen explained why a community was sickened by this proposal to further victimise us. Councillor Morris agreed to withdraw the victim-blaming pillion ban part of the proposal. We hope that she does. In fact, she didn't mention that at all. We urge you, as a defender of working people in Haringey and a friend of Haringey's motorcycling community, to hold her and her Lib Dem colleagues to account and to assure that no victim-blaming element of this motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, we all know that moped crime is clearly blighting our streets, and the Labour Mayor is not doing enough to tackle the problem. We see the reports in the papers every day. To make matters worse, the Labour Mayor of London has announced that all but one police station in the borough will close. He's chosen to close both Hornsey Police Station and Wood Green Front Counter, leaving only Tottenham Police Station open, in a new premises, as the Mayor plans on selling the current building. That sounded familiar to me, in fact very similar to Labour's plan locally to move Muswell Hill and Highgate libraries and sell off the buildings. The Lib Dems campaigned hard with others and stopped that plan, and we'll keep fighting this plan about police stations as well. We'll continue to fight for more measures to protect local residents and law-abiding motorcycle and moped owners. We believe the Mayor of London should, as Councillor Newton said earlier, improve coordination and cooperation between different borough teams and increase the tagging of motorbikes so that stolen bikes can be tracked and picked up so they're not used by the gangs. We also believe that the Mayor should keep Haringey police stations and counters open and pay for more CCTV and increase police presence in moped crime hotspots. We think these measures will go a long way to halting the scourge of moped and motorcycle crime on our streets and roads, protecting residents and the vast majority of motorcyclists who are law-abiding and, as has been said earlier, often the victims of these crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Rae.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we're probably all agreed in this chamber about the seriousness of moped crime and the kinds of crimes that you described very clearly earlier on. the acid attack took place not just in my ward, but on the estate where I live. So my local residents had a very, very real concern about that, and it was only just down the road in Waltham Forest where another more serious attack took place the same evening. So this is something I think that we all share. What I'm concerned about is the way in which the Liberal Democrats opposite seem to think that somehow Sadiq Khan has a whole wodge of money that he is refusing to release so that we can tackle these crimes and put more police on the beat. He does not have that money, which is why a special plea was made to the government when they set the budget. Because of the seriousness of crime in the capital and the impact that that has on our residents, it was the government who failed to come up with any money for London in that budget. And I find it rather extraordinary that you should choose not to attack the government, but to lay the blame on the Mayor of London. It seems to me that we should have some agreement that we do need more money in the capital, that it is for government to provide that money, and that we can then see more police on the beat, and a number of the quite useful suggestions that the various motorcycle clubs and so on have been putting forward. I don't agree with all of them, but I think a number of them are very worthwhile looking at. But they're not something that is going to work in a piecemeal way, and they're not something that can be done without any funding. So I'm supporting the amendment, and I'm hoping that when that's carried, that you will support the motion as a whole.
Thank you very much. Are there any further contributions on this motion? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to share with members an incident that happened in the summer in Wood Green. I was standing on the pavement, a crowded pavement, height of summer, with my colleague, Councillor Hare. I think Bob was about to buy some vegetables at the market. We were standing near the curb, and then suddenly, whoosh, along the pavement, there came a moped, 2 people on it, and had I been standing about a foot further forward, I'd been knocked down. I turned my head. They came. The pavement was crowded, and a bus was coming behind my back. They careered off the curb and right in front of the bus, no regard for their lives. I mean, this is one of the aspects of it, the utter sheer recklessness. And this incident, it was hot pursuit, because within seconds, the police were following in large number. I don't know what the outcome was, but you know, it was a miracle that no one was injured in that incident, which. Anyway, that's it. It's an incident I witnessed with my own eyes.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Are there any further contributions? Can we just have one meeting here? Thank you. Okay, no further contributions. I will ask Councillor Morris to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, I'd understood that Labour were making the amendment on pillion riders, and I support that amendment following my discussions with motorcycle groups. So it has my absolute support. Thank you. So I would like to move the motion. Thank you.
Right. Just to make things completely tidy, we will now vote on the amendment. If it's agreed, we will vote on the motion as amended. If not agreed, we will vote on the original motion. So we're now voting on the amendment. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against? Okay. Any abstentions? Okay. So that is agreed. The amendment is agreed. So we now vote on the motion as amended. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. And that concludes the business of the night. And I thank you all for your contributions. Thank you very much.